I'm 6'10".
Lo, 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 lo. Lo, 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 lo. Judas Iscariot.
Imagine opening your door to two strangers at dusk, only for your entire city to turn to burning ashes hours later. Lot, called righteous yet living amid Sodom's utter depravity, faced a furious mob surrounding his house, screaming for his guests' flesh. In a shocking act, he offered his own virgin daughters to calm the raging crowd, but dawn brought total destruction. Sodom and Gomorrah reduced to smoke, and Lot fled to a cave with only his two daughters. There, in desperate shadows, comes the Bible's darkest twist. The daughters got their father drunk and committed incest with him 2 nights in a row. Yet here's what will shock you. From this forbidden sin arose Moab and Ammon, Israel's future bitter enemies. Stay with me, because God's plan through this stained bloodline will shatter everything you thought you knew about grace and judgment. Imagine opening your door to two strangers at dusk, only for your entire city to turn to burning ashes hours later. The sun was dying over Sodom when they appeared. 2 men walking through the city gates as evening shadows stretched across the stone streets. They looked ordinary enough, dusty from travel, weathered from the road, nothing to mark them as different from any other traveler seeking shelter for the night. But these weren't ordinary men. These were angels of God, sent on a mission of rescue and judgment that would shake the earth itself. Genesis 19:1 tells us exactly when this happened. The 2 angels arrived at Sodom in the evening. The day was ending, and so was Sodom's time on earth, though the city didn't know it yet. Lot was sitting in the gateway of Sodom. Picture this scene. The city gate wasn't just an entrance. It was the center of social and business life, where men gathered to conduct affairs and watch the flow of people coming and going. Lot had positioned himself there, a man of standing in this wicked place, watching the evening crowd. He was righteous, the Bible tells us, but he was living in the heart of depravity. Then he saw them, 2 strangers approaching as the light faded. Lot rose to his feet immediately. Genesis 19:1 continues, "When Lot saw them, he got up to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground." Face to the ground. This wasn't a casual greeting. This was the kind of reverence you show to someone you recognize as carrying divine authority, even if you don't fully understand what you're seeing. "My lords," Lot said, his voice urgent with an intensity that surprised even him, "please turn aside to your servant's house. You can wash your feet and spend the night, and then go on your way early in the morning." Think about that urgency. Something in Lot's spirit recognized the danger these men would face if they spent the night in Sodom's streets. He knew his city, He knew what happened to vulnerable strangers after dark. He had lived with the wickedness so long that he could smell trouble coming like smoke on the wind. But the angels initially refused. "No," they answered, "we will spend the night in the square." They were testing him, seeing how far his hospitality would extend, how desperately he would fight for their safety. Lot wouldn't take no for an answer. The text says he insisted so strongly that they finally agreed to come to his house. Insisted so strongly. This wasn't polite invitation. This was a man who understood that leaving these strangers in the square meant leaving them to the wolves. Picture what happened next. Lot leading them through the darkening streets of Sodom, past houses where unspeakable things happened behind closed doors, past alleys where cries echoed in the night. The city that would soon burn was all around them, alive with its normal evening activities, completely unaware that judgment itself was walking through its streets. At Lot's house, the scene transforms into something beautiful amid all this darkness. True hospitality in a city that had forgotten what hospitality meant. Genesis 19:3 gives us the details. He prepared a meal for them, baking bread without yeast, and they ate. Lot didn't just offer them a place to sleep. He prepared a feast. He washed their feet himself, removing the dust of their journey with his own hands. He baked fresh bread, unleavened bread that could be made quickly but was still made with care. While they ate, Lot stood and served them, treating these strangers like honored guests, deserving of his very best. This is what righteousness looked like in Sodom. A man who still remembered how to show kindness to strangers, who still understood that hospitality was sacred, who still served others instead of using them. In a city consumed with taking whatever it wanted, Lot was still giving. But Sodom wouldn't let even this simple act of goodness stand. Before the angels could retire for the night, before they could rest from their journey, the true nature of the city revealed itself in all its horrifying clarity. Genesis 19:4 tells us what happened. Before they had gone to bed, all the men from every part of the city of Sodom, both young and old, surrounded the house. Read that again. All the men, every part of the city, young and old. This wasn't a small group of troublemakers. This was the entire male population of Sodom, united in their wickedness, acting as one corrupt mass. They had heard about the strangers, and they had come for them. Can you imagine what Lot heard first? Maybe footsteps in the street, growing louder and more numerous. Maybe voices calling to each other as the crowd gathered. Maybe the sound of his door being tested, pushed against, surrounded. And then the shouting began. "Where are the men who came to you tonight?" they demanded. "Bring them out to us so that we can have sex with them." There it was, the open declaration of what Sodom had become. A city so given over to sexual perversion that not even strangers, not even guests under sacred protection, were safe from their appetites. Think about what this meant. These weren't just criminals acting in darkness. This was the whole city, demanding the right to gang rape two visitors. This was depravity so complete, so shameless, that it could gather openly in the streets and make demands. This was why God's patience with Sodom had reached its end. Lot faced an impossible choice. Inside his house were two men who had accepted his hospitality, who were under his protection. Outside was an angry mob demanding their bodies. What could one righteous man do against an entire city gone mad? Genesis 19:6 shows us what he did. Lot went outside to meet them and shut the door behind him. He went out alone, shut the door behind him to keep his guests safe, faced the mob by himself. "No, my friends," he pleaded, "don't do this wicked thing." My friends. Even facing this evil, Lot tried to appeal to whatever humanity might be left in them. He called them friends, hoping against hope that reason could still reach them, that shame might still touch them. But when that failed, Lot made a choice that shocks us even today. Genesis 19:8 records his desperate offer. "Look, I have two daughters who have never slept with a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do what you like with them." But don't do anything to these men, for they have come under the protection of my roof. His own daughters, his virgin daughters. Lot was willing to sacrifice them to protect his guests. This wasn't righteousness as we understand it. This was a man trapped between two evils, choosing what he saw as the lesser one. In his mind, the sacred duty of protecting guests outweighed even the protection of his own children. Think about what this tells us about Sodom's reputation. Lot believed that nothing, absolutely nothing, good would come to strangers left alone with this city. He would rather risk his daughters than leave his guests to this mob. That's how completely he understood the evil surrounding him. But the crowd wasn't interested in his offer. They had come for the men, and they wouldn't be satisfied with anyone else. Genesis 19:9 shows their response. "Get out of our way," they replied. "This fellow came here as a foreigner, and now he wants to play the judge. We'll treat you worse than them." They called him a foreigner. After all his years in Sodom, after rising to prominence in the city, after trying to build a life there, they still saw him as an outsider. And now that he dared to oppose them, they turned on him completely. They would treat him worse than his guests. The situation was spiraling beyond control. The mob pressed forward, threatening to break down the door. They were done with negotiation, done with talk. They were going to take what they wanted, and anyone who stood in their way would be destroyed. That's when heaven intervened. Genesis 19:10 tells us what happened next. But the men inside reached out and pulled Lot back into the house and shut the door. The angels, for that's what they were, grabbed Lot and yanked him to safety. In one swift motion, they had him inside with the door secured. But they didn't stop there. Genesis 19:11 records the judgment that followed. Then they struck the men who were at the door of the house, young and old, with blindness, so that they could not find the door. Supernatural blindness, instant and complete. Picture the scene. Hundreds of men, moments before united in their evil purpose, now stumbling around in total darkness, groping for a door they could no longer see. They bumped into each other, fell over each other, called out in confusion and growing panic. The very thing they had been so confident about, breaking down Lot's door and taking his guests, was now impossible. But here's what's chilling. Even blinded, they didn't give up. The text implies they kept trying to find the door, kept searching for a way to complete their wicked purpose. That's how deep their corruption ran. Even supernatural judgment couldn't immediately turn their hearts from evil. Inside the house, everything had changed. The strangers Lot had welcomed were revealed as God's messengers. Their protection hadn't been Lot's responsibility after all. They had been protecting him. "Do you have anyone else here?" they asked Lot. Genesis 19:12 gives us their urgent question. "Sons-in-law, sons or daughters, or anyone else in the city who belongs to you, get them out of here." Time was running out. The angels had come to rescue the righteous before judgment fell. And now they needed to know who else should be saved. How many others in this wicked city belonged to Lot? How many others would be worthy of rescue when fire fell from heaven? Lot thought immediately of his daughter's fiancés. He had sons-in-law pledged to marry his daughters, young men who were part of his family circle. If anyone would listen, if anyone would believe, surely it would be them. So Lot ran out into the night one more time. But this time, he wasn't facing a mob. He was racing against time itself to save the people he loved. Genesis 19:14 tells us what happened. Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law, who were pledged to marry his daughters. He said, "Hurry and get out of this place, because the Lord is about to destroy the city." But his sons-in-law thought he was joking. They thought he was joking. These men who knew Lot, who was supposed to become part of his family, who had seen his character up close. They looked at his urgent warning about divine judgment, and they laughed. The idea that God would actually destroy Sodom seemed ridiculous to them. They were so comfortable in their sin, so sure that life would continue as it always had, that even a desperate warning from their future father-in-law struck them as comedy. Think about Lot's heart as he watched them laugh. He had risked everything to warn them. He had given them the chance to escape the destruction that was coming, and they thought it was all a joke. Dawn was approaching, and with it, the end of Sodom's time. The angels had completed their reconnaissance. They had seen the city's evil with their own eyes, had experienced its corruption firsthand, had witnessed the complete lack of righteousness that made judgment inevitable. Now there was only one task left, getting the righteous out before the fire fell. The laughter of his sons-in-law was still ringing in Lot's ears when he returned to his house, but there was no time left for persuasion. Dawn was breaking over Sodom, painting the sky in colors that would soon be consumed by supernatural fire. The angels were waiting, and their patience had reached its end. Genesis 19:15 tells us what happened next. With the coming of dawn, the angels urged Lot, saying, "Hurry! Take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, or you will be swept away when the city is punished." Hurry. The word carried the weight of eternity. Every second of delay brought them closer to sharing Sodom's fate. But Lot hesitated. Picture this moment. A man standing at the threshold of his home, looking back at everything he had built in this wicked city. His possessions, his business connections, his social standing, everything that represented decades of life in Sodom was about to be left behind forever. The human heart clings to the familiar, even when the familiar is about to be destroyed. Genesis 19:16 shows us what happened when Lot couldn't move fast enough. When he hesitated, the men grasped his hand and the hands of his wife and of his 2 daughters and led them safely out of the city, for the Lord was merciful to them. They grasped his hand. The angels didn't wait for Lot to overcome his hesitation. They physically grabbed the family and dragged them to safety. Think about that scene. Angels of God, beings of immense power, taking hold of human flesh and pulling a family towards salvation. Lot's hand in the grip of supernatural strength, his wife stumbling beside him, his daughters crying out in confusion as they were yanked away from the only life they had ever known. This wasn't a gentle escort. This was a rescue operation with seconds to spare. They were dragged through the streets of Sodom as the city slept, unaware that its final minutes were ticking away. Past the houses where evil men lived, past the places where corruption flourished, past all the sights and sounds of a civilization about to be erased from the earth. Once they were outside the city walls, the angels gave them their final instructions. Genesis 19:17 records the urgent command. As soon as they had brought them out, one of them said, "Flee for your lives. Don't look back and don't stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the mountains or you will be swept away." Flee for your lives. Don't look back. Don't stop anywhere in the plain. These weren't suggestions. These were commands that meant the difference between life and death. The mountains were safety. Everything else was the kill zone. But Lot, even in this moment of divine rescue, tried to negotiate. Genesis 19:18-20 shows his response. But Lot said to them, "No, my lords, please. Your servant has found favor in your eyes, and you have shown great kindness to me in sparing my life. But I can't flee to the mountains. Disaster will overtake me there, and I'll die. Look, here is a town near enough to run to, and it is small. Let me flee to it. It is very small, isn't it? Then my life will be spared." Oh, even facing the wrath of God, Lot was bargaining. He pointed to Zoar, a small city nearby, asking if he could run there instead of to the mountains. The man who had just been dragged from destruction was questioning the escape route his rescuers had planned for him, but incredibly, the angels agreed. Genesis 19:21 gives their response. He said to him, "Very well, I will grant this request too. I will not overthrow the town you speak of." Divine mercy extending even to a man's preference about where to find safety. Then came the words that should have sent ice through Lot's veins. "But flee there quickly, because I cannot do anything until you reach it." The destruction was being held back by Lot's presence in the danger zone. Every step he took towards safety was another second that judgment waited. God's fire was ready to fall, restrained only by the location of the righteous. So they ran. Genesis 19:23 tells us, by the time Lot reached Zoar, the sun had risen over the land. Picture that desperate flight, a family running across the plain in the early morning light, their robes whipping in the wind, their breathing labored, their feet pounding against the earth. Behind them, Sodom still stood, its towers catching the first rays of sunlight. Ahead of them, Zoar grew larger with each step. Lot reached the gates of Zoar, gasping for breath, his clothes soaked with sweat and covered with dust from the road. His legs trembled from the run, his heart pounded from exertion and terror. He had made it. They were safe. That's when God's judgment fell. Genesis 19:24-25 describes what happened next. Then the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. Thus he overthrew those cities and the entire plain, destroying all those living in the cities and also the vegetation in the land. Burning sulfur from heaven. This wasn't lightning or earthquake or any natural disaster. This was supernatural fire, direct from the throne of God, falling like rain on the cities of the plain. The sulfur burned with a heat that consumed everything it touched. Buildings, people, animals, even the very plants and trees. Imagine the sound. The roar of flames descending from the sky. The crash of buildings collapsing, the screams of people caught in the inferno with no escape. The very air itself became fire, consuming oxygen and life and hope in one vast furnace of divine wrath. The cities that had seemed so permanent, so prosperous, so secure in their wickedness, were being reduced to ash and smoke in minutes. Sodom, where Lot had built his life, where he had sat in the gates as a man of influence, gone. Gomorrah, with its markets and homes and gardens, erased. The entire plain that had looked like the Garden of Eden when Abraham and Lot first saw it, now a wasteland of flame and death. Genesis 19:28 gives us a picture of the devastation. He looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah, toward all the land of the plain, and he saw dense smoke rising from the land, like smoke from a furnace. Like smoke from a furnace. The entire region had become one vast crematorium, sending pillars of black smoke up to the heavens. But in the midst of this catastrophe, another tragedy unfolded. As Lot's family fled towards Zoar, as the fire rained down behind them, someone looked back. Luke 17:32 gives us Jesus' own warning about this moment. Remember Lot's wife, remember her, because what happened to her was both judgment and warning, both consequence and lesson for all who would hear the story. Genesis 19:26 tells us simply, but Lot's wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. She looked back. The one thing they had been specifically commanded not to do, she did. While the fire fell and the sulfur burned and the cities died, she turned her face toward the destruction she was fleeing. Think about what she saw in that final glance. The place where she had lived for years, going up in flames. The home where she had raised her daughters, being consumed by divine fire. The life she had known, ending in smoke and ash and screaming. Whatever she saw, it was the last thing she would ever see as a living woman. She became a pillar of salt, not gradually, not over time, but instantly. One moment she was running with her family towards safety. The next, she was a statue, hardened and lifeless on the road. Her husband and daughters didn't even realize what had happened until they looked back and saw her standing there, transformed by judgment, a permanent monument to the cost of looking back when God says to flee forward. Lot grabbed his daughter's hands tighter and kept running. What else could he do? His wife was gone, turned to salt on the road behind them, but the fire was still falling, and they were still alive, and Zoar was still ahead. He had to choose between grieving for the dead and saving the living. The heat from the burning cities was reaching them even at this distance, warming their backs as they ran. From Zoar, they could see it all. The pillar of smoke rising like a signal to the heavens that God's justice had been served. Genesis 19:28 tells us that Abraham, from his distant vantage point, saw dense smoke rising from the land like smoke from a furnace. If Abraham could see it from that far away, imagine how it looked to Lot, a wall of black smoke blotting out half the sky. But safety in Zoar didn't bring peace to Lot's heart. He looked at the devastation and felt fear creeping in. Genesis 19:30 tells us his next decision. Lot and his 2 daughters left Zoar and settled in the mountains, for he was afraid to stay in Zoar. Even in the city that had been spared because of him, Lot felt unsafe. The destruction was too close, too complete, too terrifying in its scope. So he took his daughters and headed for the mountains, the place the angels had originally told him to go. They climbed up into the rocky hills overlooking the Dead Sea, leaving behind the last traces of civilization, seeking isolation in the caves and cliffs where only wild animals lived. They found a cave hollowed out of the mountainside, and there they settled, 3 survivors of a catastrophe that had consumed an entire region. Lot sat at the cave's entrance, looking out over the valley where great cities had once thrived. Now there was only smoke and silence, and the bitter salt water of the Dead Sea reflecting the sky. His daughters stood beside him, looking at the same desolate view. Everything they had known was gone. Their mother was a pillar of salt on a road they could never travel again. Their fiancés were ash and bone beneath the fallen cities. The world they had grown up in had been erased in a single morning of divine judgment. The silence in the cave was absolute. No voices from the plain below, no sounds of human activity, no reminder that civilization still existed somewhere in the world. Just the wind whistling through the rocks and the distant shimmer of the Dead Sea, marking the spot where God's fire had fallen. The silence of the mountain was absolute. 3 people alone in a cave, facing a future that stretched before them like the desolate wasteland below. Day after day, they fell into a routine born of necessity and numbed by trauma. Lot woke each morning to the sound of wind cutting through the cave walls, sharp and cold against the stone. He would sit at the cave entrance, looking out over the Dead Sea that glittered in the distance, marking the spot where his entire life had been erased. His daughters moved through their days gathering dried wood, scattered across the rocky slopes, finding water from springs that trickled down the mountain, preparing simple meals from their saved provisions. But as days turned to weeks, the weight of their isolation pressed down on them, like the stone ceiling above. They talked in whispers when they thought Lot couldn't hear, conversations that stopped abruptly when he approached, discussions held in corners while he slept or stared at the ruins below. The older daughter's voice carried further than she realized, and fragments reached Lot's ears like pieces of a puzzle he didn't want to solve. "There is no man in the earth," the older daughter said one evening, her voice carrying desperate calculation. Genesis 19:31 records her exact words spoken to her sister in the growing darkness. Think about what those words meant. Not just, there are no men nearby, but there is no man in the earth. In her mind, the destruction had been so complete that they might be the only people left alive. She had been watching their father. Lot was aging before their eyes, trauma and isolation wearing him down daily. "Our father is old," she continued, stating the terrifying obvious. Think about their situation. 2 young women raised in civilization suddenly cut off from all human contact except their aging father. No prospects for marriage, no hope of children, no future for their family line. Their mother was salt on an unreachable road. Their fiancés were ash beneath burned cities. They were witnessing the end of their bloodline the older daughter had been planning. Genesis 19:32 records what she proposed. Let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie down with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. Make their father drink wine. The plan was simple, desperate, and unthinkable. Get Lot drunk enough that he wouldn't know what was happening, then use his body to ensure their family line continued. The younger daughter's response was immediate agreement. No hesitation, no moral questions. She looked at their father with new eyes, not as their protector and savior, but as their only possible means of survival. Her nod was quick, determined, final. They had wine. Somehow, in their chaotic flight from Sodom, they had managed to carry wine, perhaps thinking to trade it, perhaps grabbing whatever they could. Now that wine became the key to their desperate scheme. They hid it carefully in the darker recesses of the cave, away from where Lot might notice, away from daily routines. While their father continued sitting at the cave mouth, drinking spring water, staring at the wasteland that had been his world, his daughters planned in whispers. The older daughter took charge. When to approach him with wine, how much to give him, how to ensure unconsciousness. The conversations were clinical, determined, stripped of emotion or doubt. Evening came with the first test of their plan. The older daughter approached Lot with wine, her voice gentle. Father, you look tired. Perhaps this will help you rest. Lot, exhausted by grief and isolation, accepted gratefully. The wine was strong, potent after days of only water. One cup led to another. The older daughter was patient, attentive, ensuring his cup never emptied. Lot, numbed by alcohol and constant loss, drank without suspicion. His mind grew foggy, his words slurred, his awareness dimmed. The cave grew dark around them. Their fire cast shifting shadows on stone walls. Lot's breathing grew heavy as wine took effect, his body relaxing into deep, unconscious sleep that comes from exhaustion combined with strong drink. The daughters exchanged glances across the cave. Looks that held questions and answers, determination and fear, desperation and resolve. They had passed the point of return. Their father lay unconscious on the cold floor, unaware of what surrounded him, unaware of what they planned. The older daughter moved quietly in darkness, watching the rise and fall of his chest, listening to his deep breathing. The mountain silence covered even whispers now, as if stones conspired to hide what would happen in the cave. Lot slept on, mind dulled by wine and trauma, completely unaware that his daughters had decided his body was their only hope for survival. The older daughter had made her choice, and now there was no turning back from what she believed was necessary for their bloodline to continue. The wine had done its work perfectly. Cup after cup, the older daughter had filled and refilled her father's vessel until his eyes grew heavy and his words became slurred whispers in the cave's darkness. Genesis 19:33 tells us exactly what happened. That night, they got their father to drink wine, and the older daughter went in and slept with him. They got their father to drink wine. This wasn't accidental intoxication. This was a deliberate plan, executed with cold precision. Lot's body had grown heavy on the cold cave floor. His breathing deepened into the rhythm of unconscious sleep, the kind of complete oblivion that comes when strong wine meets exhaustion and grief. His chest rose and fell steadily. His limbs relaxed completely. His mind lost in darkness deeper than the cave around them. Think about what happened next. The older daughter, watching her father's unconscious form by the flickering light of their small fire, made her move. She approached him in the cave's shadows, her bare feet silent on the stone floor. The rough texture of his aged skin was illuminated by the weak flames that cast dancing shadows on the cave walls. Genesis 19:33 continues with brutal honesty. He was not aware of it when she lay down or when she got up. Not aware. Lot, The righteous man who had been saved from Sodom's destruction lay completely unconscious while his own daughter used his body to conceive a child. He felt nothing, knew nothing, remembered nothing of what was being done to him in the darkness. She lay down with him in that cold cave, executing the plan she had whispered about with her sister. The fire provided the only light in their stone prison, flickering across their bodies as she committed an act that would echo through generations. The silence of the mountain covered everything. No sounds of civilization, no voices of neighbors, nothing but the wind through the rocks and her father's heavy breathing. When it was finished, she rose silently and moved away from his unconscious form. She stepped carefully across the cave floor, her feet finding familiar paths in the darkness, returning to her place before dawn could break over the mountains. Lot never stirred, never opened his eyes, never gave any sign that his body had been used while his mind was lost in wine-induced sleep. The grey light of dawn crept into the cave slowly, painting the stone walls in pale colors. Lot began to stir, his head heavy with the effects of too much wine, his body aching from sleeping on the hard cave floor. He groaned and sat up slowly, pressing his hands to his temples as the pain of his hangover made itself known. But he remembered nothing. Genesis 19:33 makes this clear. He was not aware of what had happened when his daughter lay down or when she got up. The wine had done more than make him unconscious. It had stolen his memory of the night entirely. As far as Lot knew, he had simply drunk too much and fallen into a deep sleep. The older daughter watched him carefully as he rose and stumbled toward the cave entrance, looking for water to clear his head. Her sister approached her quietly, eyes full of questions that couldn't be spoken aloud while their father was nearby. "Did it work?" the younger daughter whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. The older sister nodded, a small, serious movement that confirmed what they both hoped and feared. The plan had been executed. Now they could only wait to see if it would produce the result they desperately needed. Lot collected water from the mountain spring, splashing his face and drinking deeply to wash away the taste of wine and the fog in his head. He noticed nothing different about his daughter's behavior, saw nothing in their expressions to suggest that anything had changed during his unconscious hours. To him, it was simply another morning in their isolated existence. But the daughters began a new kind of waiting. Weeks passed as they watched the older sister's body for any signs of change. They studied her carefully each morning, looking for the early symptoms that would tell them their desperate gamble had succeeded. Her belly remained flat, her monthly cycle continued normally, and their hope began to turn to anxiety. The older daughter made a calculated decision. If once wasn't enough, then the plan would have to be repeated. She had crossed the line already. Crossing it again seemed almost inevitable. The wine remained hidden in their cave, ready to serve its purpose once more. Night after night, she continued the pattern, offering her father wine to help him sleep, to ease his grief, to numb the pain of their losses. Lot, grateful for anything that could quiet his tortured thoughts, drank willingly. He developed no suspicion about the routine, noticed no connection between the wine and his deep, dreamless sleep. The cave echoed with nothing but his heavy breathing as the wine took effect each night. The daughters felt the hard stone floor beneath their feet as they moved through their plan with growing determination. Lot would wake each morning to find an empty cup beside him, never questioning who had served him or why his memory of the previous evening was so unclear. The strong wine darkened his mind completely, just as they needed it to. Each night brought the same unconscious sleep, the same complete unawareness, the same blank memory when morning came. The older daughter returned to her sleeping place before dawn each time, maintaining the secret that bound her and her sister together. The isolation of their mountain cave reinforced their conviction that this was their only choice. No sounds of human life reached them, no hope of rescue or contact with other survivors. In their minds, they were preserving the last remnant of their family line through the only means available to them. Week after week, the pattern continued. Lot drinking wine and falling into unconsciousness, never knowing that his body was being used while his mind was lost in alcoholic darkness. The secret remained locked between the two sisters, a conspiracy born of desperation and executed in the shadows of their stone refuge. The older daughter had made her choice, and now she was committed to seeing it through until her plan succeeded. But success would require her sister to make the same terrible decision, to cross the same line that had already been crossed in the darkness of their mountain cave. The younger daughter had watched the pattern develop over the weeks. She had seen how the wine worked, how completely it rendered their father unconscious, how thoroughly it erased his memory of what happened during those dark hours. Now, it was her turn to take the cup and serve it to him, knowing exactly what she intended to do once he fell into that deep, wine-induced sleep. Genesis 19:34 records what happened next. The next day, the older daughter said to the younger, "Last night, I slept with my father. Let's get him to drink wine again tonight, and you go in and sleep with him so we can preserve our family line through our father." Last night, I slept with my father. The words were spoken matter-of-factly, without shame or hesitation, as if what they were discussing was a normal plan for survival rather than an act that would horrify the world. The younger daughter needed no convincing. She had already agreed to this course of action, had already accepted that their desperate circumstances justified desperate measures. That evening she took the wine to their father, her hands steady as she poured cup after cup, watching his eyes grow heavy and his words become slurred. Lot drank willingly, as he had been doing for weeks now. The wine helped dull the constant ache of his losses, helped him forget for a few hours that his wife was a pillar of salt on an unreachable road, that his world had been consumed by fire from heaven. He trusted his daughters completely. They were all he had left, and they were caring for him in their isolated refuge. The younger daughter served him until he reached that familiar state of total intoxication. His breathing slowed and deepened as the wine took complete control of his consciousness. His body grew heavy on the cave floor, his awareness fading into the same black void that had claimed him night after night. Then she moved toward him in the darkness. Genesis 19:34 continues, "So that night they got their father to drink wine, and the younger daughter went and slept with him." The younger daughter went and slept with him. Think about what those simple words represent. A young woman approaching her unconscious father in the flickering light of their cave fire, using his body while his mind was lost in alcoholic darkness. She felt the heat of his skin as she lay beside him, felt his slow breathing as she executed the same plan her sister had carried out. Lot remained completely unconscious throughout the act, never stirring, never opening his eyes, never showing any awareness that anything was happening to him in the cave's shadows. When it was finished, she rose silently and returned to her place, just as her sister had done. She moved carefully across the stone floor, her footsteps making no sound that might wake their father. By the time dawn's grey light began to creep into the cave, she was back in her sleeping area, and Lot remained unconscious on the floor where she had left him. Genesis 19:35 confirms what happened. Again, he was not aware of it when she lay down or when she got up. Again, he was not aware. The wine had done its work perfectly for the second time, stealing not just his consciousness, but his memory of what had been done to his body while he slept. Lot woke with the same heavy head and confused thoughts that had become routine. He sat up slowly, pressing his hands to his temples, feeling the familiar ache of too much wine, but remembering nothing of how the night had actually passed. As far as he knew, he had simply drunk himself to sleep once again. The daughters exchanged glances that morning, looks that confirmed they had both completed their desperate plan. No words needed to be spoken. They had crossed every line, broken every taboo, committed acts they could never undo or speak of openly. Now, they could only wait to see if their scheme would produce the children they so desperately believed they needed. The waiting began immediately. Both sisters started watching their bodies for the earliest signs of pregnancy, touching their stomachs each morning, paying attention to every change in how they felt. They had committed incest with their father. Now they hoped those horrible acts would result in the continuation of their family line. Weeks passed, and the signs began to appear. The older daughter's belly started to show the first subtle rounding that suggested new life growing within her. Her monthly cycle stopped. Her breasts began to change. Her body started the transformation that meant their plan was working. The younger daughter began experiencing the nausea that comes in early pregnancy, waking each morning with waves of sickness that she had to hide from their father. She felt the familiar symptoms that told her she too was carrying a child conceived in darkness through an act of desperation. Lot observed these changes in his daughters without understanding their cause. He noticed that they seemed tired, that they sometimes looked pale or unwell, that their bodies appeared to be changing in ways he couldn't quite identify. His voice carried concern when he asked about their health, but the concern was vague, unfocused, without any suspicion of the truth. "Are you feeling well?" he would ask, watching them prepare their simple meals or gather wood for their fire. "You seem different lately." "Way." But when they deflected his questions, changing the subject to trivial matters about their daily routine or observations about the weather, he didn't press for answers. The daughters became experts at hiding their growing pregnancies. They adjusted their simple clothing to conceal their expanding bellies, wore loose robes that disguised the changes in their bodies. They continued serving their father meals and caring for his needs as if nothing had changed, as if they weren't carrying children conceived through acts that violated every natural law. As the months passed, their pregnancies became impossible to hide completely. Their bellies rounded visibly, their movements became more careful, their bodies clearly showed the signs of women expecting children. But Lot, living with them daily in their isolated cave, somehow never made the connection between these physical changes and those wine-soaked nights when his memory went blank. The daughters began preparing for what was coming. They tore strips of cloth to serve as swaddling for the babies, gathered soft materials to make beds for the infants they would soon deliver. The isolation that had driven them to their desperate acts now protected their secret completely. There was no one to ask questions, no neighbors to notice their condition, no community to condemn what they had done. In the silence of their mountain refuge, two sisters carried children fathered by their own unconscious parent, preparing to give birth to a generation born from the darkest desperation. The older daughter's time came first. The contractions began in the early hours of a cold morning, waves of pain that echoed off the cave walls like her own cries. There was no midwife, no other woman to help, except her sister. No comfort except the rough stone beneath her and the flickering fire that provided their only light. She screamed as the labor intensified, her voice bouncing off the rocky surfaces that had become their entire world. The pain was overwhelming in that confined space, magnified by the cave's acoustics until it seemed the very mountains were crying out with her. Her sister knelt beside her, offering what comfort she could, but they were alone in this as they had been alone in everything since fleeing Sodom's destruction. The baby descended through the birth canal as the older daughter gripped the stone floor, her knuckles white with the effort of bringing new life into their isolated world. Finally, with a cry that seemed to shake the cave itself, the child emerged, a healthy boy with strong lungs that announced...
Oh भाई, maybe I messed this up. Okay, from this perspective, it's east. Yeah. Make a mistake. So okay, it's working. Now I'll need a soft आनंद आनंद यीशु मातो आनंद. Yes, I want 10 or so Shulker Ox fillers. ये वाला तो पता खाली कर. शाह तू ही चाह तू था तो मैं ना था ऐसे. This rocks filling. Son of my soul. I have to go into creative and get one. फिलर इसलिए क्योंकि देख ऑटो स्मेल्टर माई डिजाइन, कारपेट ड्यूपर ये नहीं, क्रीपर फार्म भी नहीं, फार्म स्टोरेज यस। Reason that I sing, salvation of my soul. Rather than doing this, the इतना एरिया सेम है, ठीक है। This much is independent. ये बना देता हूँ मैं, not easy but worth it. Pillars over build. Let's see. Filker works, fillers, which system, arms. Bulk storage, yes.
This is a showcase video of the Shulker-based bulk storage solution that I use in my base. Showcase means that I'm not going to provide a block-by-block tutorial. Instead, I'm going to include a world map. There's not really anything super technical, and this is just a tileable design. So I wasn't sure if a full tutorial was going to be necessary. I would send them down into a shulker box loader right here. Filled shulker boxes would go into these chests. We've got 3 double chests of storage, which should hold over 300,000 items. And then the filled shulker boxes end up right here. And then below it, we've got a shulker box dispenser, so that from the front side, you have access to filled shulker boxes as well as individual items. So I can come up here, I can grab a shulker box out of the chest up here, and I can also...
Nope. Shulker और डिमांड ऐसा कुछ नहीं चाहिए मुझे। Minecraft shulker box loader. I think making this one for okay, unload schematic. This does carry a bit of weight, but it is not necessary for me. devna atma I think we can make 7 of this. Then we have to make a gap. We don't need these carpets. Actually, maybe we do. Okay, actually, this much is an item sorter. ठीक है, अपने को आइटम सॉर्टिंग से कोई मतलब नहीं है. Okay, let's remove what's not necessary. And as much as I want to say, I think these carpets were necessary. It will add white carpets. Plating 1, 2, 3. लाइक यहाँ पे मोस्टली मेरे water, then ball, brick wall, chest, maybe we can use ब्लू आई से मार देंगे। 3 4 5 सब जगह पे ओके चांस मार दो। Yes, it is taken by the offer. One, two, three, four. So let's तोड़ फोड़ नहीं करना। Okay, we want something like this. ओके, भर ले रहे हैं मतलब ये लोग, ठीक है। No, I'll need a whole ton of I guess इतने बहुत है। ये four, 1, to replace this moving by smooth stone. Let's fill 414 minus 47 862 394 minus 57 850 rosemary what would this be called? Rosemary bricks. $850 rosemary bricks with replace moonstone. No blocks are filled. यार प्रिज्मरीन के जगह अपनी चीज़ें यूज़ कर लेंगे। I guess that much should be done by our own selves. Area editor. So it's gonna take local storage. Single player में क्या सामान चाहिए? Oh, go hallelujah in the name of our enemies. Urla iron, he है bars. Redeemable. P6 मतलब around 3 stack. Go. Huh? That's the iron. Six chest. Oh, more than enough chest. We want to do this in 9. Okay, please on this, we are going to use Moonstone. 64. 6. 60 redstone dust. Redstone dust just to be okay. Pillars. I guess I created just a really short time ago. केयरफुली आयरन ट्रेड करना होगा क्योंकि आयरन फार्म चालू है नहीं चालू नहीं पता आपने. पहले जो इसका काम रेवड़ी ले लेते शायद निकल जाएगा. अच्छा छोटा थॉट. redstone 60 redstone torches. पर सच ये 30 तो है, तो नहीं है मेरे पास। इधर है। क्या हुआ, स्टोन है। Lot of restaurant to work with. This guy I am not even decent in. To be at home. Of the world, you down into darkness. Open my eyes, I can see. So here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my Lord. 15 कंपैरेटर, 15 आदमी। कंपैरेटर के लिए कितना रेडस्टोन चाहिए? 3, मतलब सिमिलर ही है। तीनों तीन स्टिक के फॉर्म में चाहिए। हो गया। कितना चाहिए? 15 2 30 45 1 2 3 46 47 है, कोई दिक्कत नहीं, उतना ऊपर नीचे रह सकते हैं अपन। Open my eyes, let me breathe. So here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my Lord. You're altogether worthy, altogether lovely, altogether wonderful to me. Mr. Torch है। Okay. ऑब्जर्वर्स कितने चाहिए? 30 ऑब्जर्वर्स चाहिए, जिसमें से कितने क्राफ्ट किए? 15। कितने बनेगा? 10। 5 और ऑब्जर्वर चाहिए। 3। ओके, पावर स्टोन। Okay. 30 observers done. 30 slabs. Let's do it. Okay, slabs done. Can't get the give one either. I think I'll use them. I've done that one repeated and 30 sticky bits done. Sticky part 15 dispensers. नीचे जाके अपना बंदा ये कर देता हूँ। God. कुछ नहीं लेने दिया इसे दूर बैठ block is now blocked. Disco, disco, disco. La. सुबह तुझ में ही हर शाम है, तुझसे ही करता शुरू मैं हर कोई काम। तुझसे शुरू। सही चीजें ले लेते तो फिर अप्रॉक्स एक स्टैक जैसी तो चाहिए रहेगी एक स्ट्रिंग। 30 टिके पिस्टन्स। तो बस इनफ। फिर में इनफ नहीं होगा लेकिन टोटल इनफ है। तुझ में ही मेरी सुबह, तुझ में ही हर शाम है, तुझसे ही करता शुरू मैं हर कोई काम। आई आई तेरा wood abundant and wood। ये ले रुपये 28 ही बनाए क्यों? स्टोन की कमी ये लो पूरी हो गई। एक फैंस की तुझ में ही मेरी सुबह, तुझ में ही हर शाम है, तुझसे ही करता शुरू मैं हर कोई काम। ओके। उसके अंदर छिलका लगा देना होता है मतलब मैं तो छिलकर बॉक्स भर दूंगा उधर, कत्ती भर दूंगा। अगला क्या चाहिए? ठीक है, पिस्टन हो गया, ब्लू आइज हो गया, आयरन बार्स। मोर देन एनफ हो चुके हैं। द एक्सटेंड क्लास नहीं चाहिए, सादा क्लास बात करेंगे अपन। मेरा शिल्कर्स उधर ही बना लेंगे। सैंड भी ऊपर बनी है ना, और एक और चीज़ सैंड लेके जानी थी भाई। इतनी क्यों जाके ड्यूप कर सके। एक साल लेकर आएगा। Resell me your stuff. I think this much time is enough. और getting 15-30 कुछ 15 स्ट्रेंथ मिल जाएगी मुझे। I'm hoping that this is kind of a cheating. But we all can surely tell के इतनी जल्दी मुझे अदरवाइज स्ट्रिंग नहीं मिलेगी। किस में भोला भाला था, सीधा सादा था, मैं तो मासूम था। भोला भाला था, सीधा सादा था, मैं तो मासूम था। You can tell you are deep when you need 2 level 3 flight rockets to just get back up. क्या हाँ इसके अंदर पड़ी थी। वही सोचो यार कहीं तो देखी थी एक स्टिक्स 21 15 Red cobblestone. We need redstone. बना ले अपने को तो 15 ही चाहिए थे। तो नादान था। Let's take at least 2 of this. I think थोड़े से बिल्डिंग ब्लॉक्स ले लेते हैं ऐसे ही एक चेस्ट में भर लेते हैं। Not required. Anything, but मेरा मन कह रहा है ले लेने चाहिए मुझे। I don't know who to craft one. For the first and last and the final time, we need some. I'm not going to warn myself again. नीचे बहुत हो गया, मुझे तो 10-15 ही चाहिए। ऊपर कैसे जाने का? Okay. Let's make this convo close. Oh, stop. I surrender. Oh. आई थिंक दिस इज द टाइम जब अपन क्रिएटिव में जाते हैं, चेकआउट कर लेते हैं कि क्या इसमें कुछ डालना था। तो होपर फील्स एम्प्टी, इनमें कुछ भी नहीं, इनमें ये खाली शेलकर बॉक्सेस आएंगे। मजा मतलब साला जमा कर पाया तो ठीक है, नहीं कर पाया मेरी गलती, नहीं कर पाया तो जमा कर दे। इसकी ज़रूरत पड़ेगी, इसकी भी ज़रूरत पड़ेगी, बाकी सब चेस्ट में डाल दो। भाई साहब आई मीन सब okay, no. Just hope I have one enough shulkers. ठीक है. लेगी उसके बाद I can claim water. Yes, we shouldn't have slept. ये देखें कि ये विलेजर्स स्पॉन हो रहा है। पता है स्पॉन ही नहीं हो रहा तो सबका बैड तोड़ के फिर से लगाने पड़ेंगे। ये काम रात को ही हो सकता है। कारपेट चाहिए थी। I guess अपना ऐसी कंडीशन पे तो रेडी नहीं है कि कुछ कर ही नहीं सकते। थोड़े से शेल्स रखता हूँ in case of any need. I don't think there will be any, but don't know which similar this guy is carrying, but it was there, so I kept it. Simple as that. Lord to Jesus, Sarada, Jesus. Okay, now I think the farm is ready. Maybe it has to be this way. लोहा टाटा का, छोड़ा जाटा का. Asara. Asara. Discount. लोहा टाटा का, छोड़ा जाटा का. And the rates are insane. Let's work on lanterns. लोहा टटका छोटा झटका। देख मशरूम अच्छा नहीं लगेगा, ना ही चेरी ट्री लगेगा, लेकिन चेरी ट्री गरीब है। ठीक है। चेरी ट्री अच्छा लग रहा है। कार बॉक्स भी नहीं भरा। Going. skeleton thing on anyone can spawn. Yaki Oti Daria Ki surrender all. Surrender all. अभी विलेजर वाला काम AFK कर देंगे। ऊपर भरने वाला देखते हैं कब करते हैं। काम को आई थिंक फोर्स लोड करना है अभी। बनाने के बाद करेंगे। अगर ये तो गिर जाएगा। वरना क्रीपर फार्म पे स्पॉन कर देता एंड देन कैन शेयर। चले स्पॉन करा लो। जो आधा घंटा ही है तो हो सकता है। दस जैसे शलकर बॉक्स भर गए हो तो फार्म बंद करने का टाइम आ चुका है। I don't know what that means. एक काम बंद करना पड़ेगा।
His arrival to the mountain sides. Genesis 19:37 tells us what happened next. The older daughter gave birth to a son, and she named him Moab. Moab. The name itself was a declaration, though Lot didn't understand its true meaning. In Hebrew, the name carried the sense of "from father," a permanent reminder of how this child had been conceived, though only the sisters knew the full truth. Lot heard the baby's cries echoing through the cave and came quickly to see what had happened. He found his older daughter holding a newborn son, exhausted but alive, the infant's cries filling the space that had been silent for so long. But Lot asked no questions about where this baby had come from, whose child this was, or how his daughter had become pregnant in their complete isolation. Think about that. A man living alone with his daughters suddenly finds himself with a newborn grandchild, and it never occurs to him to question the circumstances. The trauma of Sodom's destruction, the isolation, the wine-fogged nights, all of it had left him in a state where he simply accepted what was in front of him without deeper investigation. The younger daughter helped cut the umbilical cord with a sharp stone they had prepared, her hand steady despite the magnitude of what she was witnessing. This was the first fruit of their desperate plan, the beginning of the preservation of their bloodline that they had sacrificed everything to achieve. Days passed as the older daughter recovered from giving birth, nursing her son in the cave's dim light. Then, the younger daughter's contractions began. She had watched her sister endure labor and knew what was coming. But knowing didn't make the pain any less intense when it was her turn to bring forth life in that cold mountain refuge. She gave birth to her own son, screaming as her sister had screamed, the sound reverberating off stone walls that had witnessed too much. This second boy emerged healthy and strong, his skin pink and warm in the cave's chill. Genesis 19:38 records his naming. The younger daughter also gave birth to a son, and she named him Ben-Ami. Ben-Ami, meaning son of my people, or son of my kinsman. Another name that held hidden meaning about the true parentage of these children. Now there were two babies in the cave, two infant voices crying for milk and warmth and comfort. The sisters nursed their sons under Lot's unknowing gaze, holding the children they had conceived through acts they could never speak of openly. Lot looked at these babies, his grandsons, he thought, and smiled at the continuation of his family line, never suspecting that he was actually looking at his own sons. The children grew in their mountain isolation, crawling across the uneven cave floor, taking their first steps on stone that had become their entire universe. Lot watched them develop with the proud affection of a grandfather, holding them when they cried, playing simple games to entertain them, never recognizing his own features appearing in their young faces. Moab and Ben-Ami became the center of life in their cave refuge. The sisters told them stories of the great destruction they had escaped, describing the fire from heaven that had consumed the cities of the plain, the flight that had saved their lives. The boys listened with wide eyes to tales of burning sulfur.
Yes, बस आज के लिए ना होगा. Good night.